been a very successful entrepreneur, and now you are on a journey to actually share what you have acquired with other entrepreneurs. So as you get into the world of investments and nurturing people, what's your vision? What are the things you would like to see happen in the world?
I guess as I look through what I've done in my life and what I still have to do in my life, I get very conscious about what difference I want to make. And that's sort of my purpose of my life, to make a difference. So I've thought about it over the last few years. There are two areas I care about. One area is one I know quite well, which is how to build companies, tech companies, and build significant ones. And I've seen the impact of doing that in the US and in China, and then vicariously in Europe and India also. And I think it's time that we did some of that in Southeast Asia. And I want to be part of building the next generation of globals based out of Southeast Asia.
So when you say globals, it's people who are here, who are coming to prominent, but really become global
the
leaders.
Brands known internationally, people understand that it's built here in Southeast Asia, and it's anywhere you go in Europe, anywhere. So that's just like Singapore is a brand that almost everyone on the planet understands. Some of the companies, that are being started today, hopefully in 10 years' time will be global brands. So I want to be part of that.
Yeah. So, Asia is quite an ancient culture. Do you feel that this whole idea of being a global citizen, etc., is it a newer trend, or why is it that it's going to take much longer than everywhere else for companies from here or individuals from here to become global?
No, I don't think it will take longer. I think Silicon Valley started first as an ecosystem. So, you see a lot more unicorns and world-renowned brands coming from there. You look at China, it started only 10, 15 years ago. Now some of the biggest companies are from there, right? Tech companies specifically. And I think we only started here in Southeast Asia, I would say 5, 10 years ago. So it'll take us some more time to get there.
Yeah. So in some ways, there is a certain exponential progress happening. If we took Silicon Valley 50 and China 15, maybe it's 10 here. So what are your thoughts on singularity? What are your thoughts on where are we all going?
Yeah. So all this human work to create value and all that, at some point I think becomes less and less important. And it's because, some history. I went to computer science school to study artificial intelligence years ago because I thought, wouldn't it be great to build machines that can do all these things that we do? Well, slowly but surely that's happening, right? You got cars that drive themselves, you get programs that can talk to you, right, on your phone. So over time, machines will get better and better at doing things. And even though it might take a long while before machines can be our equivalent, can replace a full human being, that means, can do as much as we can do intellectually and physically. The journey itself will not be, 0 and then 1, right? It'll be incrementally, machines get better. At some point in time, taxi drivers have no jobs because the cars are much more effective at driving cars around. So the question of singularity, I don't think amongst the technical community is a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right? Singularity is commonly sort of defined as a point in time where machines are so much better than human beings at doing everything we do, that we really can't predict what's going to happen next, right?
So if that's the case, there is also the conversation, just this morning about can machines replace everything? What happens to, what element is going to be human? What element of humanity is going to remain? Can we emulate all the idiosyncrasies of a human brain and all the complexities of it in a machine? Do you believe even that is a matter of when and not if?
So we're getting very philosophical here. depending on your belief system, your faith, whether you're materialist as a philosophy, as a way of thinking about existence, or a dualist, right? If you're a materialist, then you go, why not, right? At some point, you could recreate a machine that behaves like human beings, because human beings are basically biological machines, right? If you're a dualist, then you think there's something else beyond the material, and therefore you can't do it in a machine. I think these debates are not very useful. I think what we try to do is improve the good on the planet, right? So that people's lives get better using whatever tools we have, and technology is one of those tools.
So now coming back to something practical from philosophical, we do agree that many jobs are going to be eliminated.
Yes.
And they are going to be taken over by machines. So there is going to be a much larger population that's not going to have jobs, and they're going to be done by a smaller number of people. And also what we are replacing is mostly large mechanized jobs with smart robots, etc. So how are we going to deal with a world where fewer are going to be useful, so to speak? So in what way do you feel we need to change our own thinking about work?
Yeah, I started to have a conversation with a friend of mine who's actually a minister in Singapore, and I was surprised that he's thinking about these issues. Basically, we do kind of assume that at some point a lot of jobs will start disappearing, and then what do you do to prepare culture for it? So we started talking about the question about what happens when the economic value of manual labor tends to zero, and that's going to happen first before all labor, right? So the interesting conclusion we came to is that the first problem that everyone might think was a big problem is actually not the biggest problem. The first problem is, well, a bunch of people will be out of jobs, how do you feed them, etc. And the Gini index is shooting through the roof. Well, mechanically, this is why there are governments, right? To make sure people are taken care of. So you will see a much more socialistic view on life on the planet over time. Because if you can't provide food for yourself, but the productivity of the nation is going through the roof because of automation, then you need to redistribute the wealth somewhere. So that's an easy, quote-unquote, easy problem to solve, because it's almost a mechanical problem. It's also a political problem, but I think it's not that hard. I think the longer we thought about it some more, and we realized there's a bigger problem to be looked at, which is, I label it a spiritual problem. A lot of us derive our sense of being, our sense of worth, self-worth, sense of identity through what we do, right? Think about conversation started. What do you do? I'm an engineer, etc. What happens when what you do is you wake up, you collect a paycheck, and you eat and you sleep, right? What happens to your spirit? What happens to your energy? And I think this is a question that we should start exploring before too long, and start building that into our education system, our culture, so that when these things happen, we have purpose, we have meaning beyond how we make a living.
So what would that be? So one of the things you said is that we need to bake it into our education. So it may not be about just slight improvements to the current education, but we may have to look at whole new paradigm of education. So right now, you study to get a degree and get a job. That's the whole purpose.
That's right.
So in what way do you think education should or could change to prepare you for this new world?
Yeah, I think there's several stages of change. I think in the short term, there's still a lot of value to be, economic value to be had in education. So we cannot abandon this. In fact, I have a foundation that's working on, it's called Solve Education. It's working on how do you solve education for people who don't have teachers in schools, right? We still believe there's a lot of economic value to be gained by just knowing things. And that view is actually that the bulk of economic value of education today comes from putting bits, information into the heads of kids, right? So the question we ask is, well, are schools and teachers really necessary if you can achieve that? So we're working on projects to try and test the hypothesis that you could actually do that. And if you can, then you can solve education in a much bigger way in the short term. In the long term, though, I've always been fascinated. I've always paid attention to education as well as economic policies. But education is fascinating to me because it's very production-oriented, right? If you go to schools and you talk to 100 kids and you ask them, have you been asked the question, what is the purpose of your life, right? Yeah. Most of the kids have not been even asked that question, right? And if you think about what's going to happen, I don't know when, but when singularity approaches, right, the purpose of your life will drive you more and more. That's much more. What is the meaning of your existence, right? And those kinds of exploration questions might be a bit difficult for younger kids, but as you go into your teens, as you're about to go to college, you definitely should have some ways, some forums to explore these questions. So these are the things that, some of the changes I think education should have over time.
So, to summarize, to build an ecosystem, on one hand, you're investing in the entrepreneurs of today.
Yes.
On the other hand, you're building an education system for tomorrow, which may include things like questioning your purpose, compassion, beyond day-to-day work, what is the larger purpose, conscious. I mean, there's a lot of things that today we say, not necessary that we need to bake in. And I just wanted you to leave us with, to build, everybody talks about Silicon Valley when we talk about entrepreneurship, and that is entrepreneurship of today. But there's an entrepreneurship of tomorrow we need to create first. So what would you love to see happen, especially in the Southeast Asia where you're focusing on? What would you like to see happen here?
Yeah. One of my favorite definition of a goal of an entrepreneur is someone that makes meaning.
Makes meaning.
And I hope there'll be lots of people here that makes meaning.
Yeah, and I think to do that, it is very important to have forums where people are recognized for meaning, and also places, not necessarily a forum, places or companies where you can fail, you can get up, and it's not just a money-making organization, but other impactful things too.
Definitely.
So we really look forward to keeping up to date on what you're working on to see how we approach this meaning. And as we wrap up, do you have any other thoughts to share?
No, I think watch this space, right? Southeast Asia. I think a lot's going to happen in the next 10 to 20 years.
Yeah. No, we're very excited about that. And I think as we talked about progress being exponential, I think some of the changes we'll see in the next 5 years, not necessarily in the next 50 years.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much for your time. Thanks.
Thank you.